He is risen. There were two gas company workers that arrived at a suburb in order to check all the gas meters. And one was a senior training individual, and the other was in training. And as they parked at the end of the suburban area, they walked all the way down and were checking all the meters. When they got to the last meter, it so happened that the lady of the house was looking through her kitchen window and saw these young men, or one younger man and one older man, checking the meter. And when they finished checking the meter, the older man said to the trainee, "I'll race you back to the car," because he wanted to show that the older guy could really, run faster than the younger guy. So they ran and raced all the way to the vehicle down at the other end of the suburban street. And when they got there, they turned around, and here's this lady from the house running right behind them, completely breathless. And they looked at her and says, "What in the world are you doing?" She said, "When I see two gas men run from my house, I figure I better run too." In John chapter 20, verses 1 to 10, we have Mary running to Peter and John, and then John running to the tomb, and we realize that Peter is concerned because he knows that the tomb is empty, and he's believing that Mary has told him that the body of Jesus has been stolen away. And they're running. Peter is running scared, just like Mary was running scared. And we learned in the first service that John was probably running hopeful because he knew and he was confident that that tomb was empty because Jesus was alive. But the rest of the story is John 20, beginning at verse 11. And it reads as follows. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the head and one at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. Martin Luther, not Martin Luther King Jr., but Martin Luther from the 16th century, was known to be despondent at times and was a person who experienced despair quite often. And he went into one of those 3 days of depression. And about the third day, Kate, his wife, came down the steps all dressed in black. And Martin Luther looked at her and said, "Why are you dressed in black? Who died?" And Kate said, "God died." And Martin Luther said, "God didn't die." And Kate said, "Well, the way you've been acting, it seems as though he really did die." Mary Magdalene was convinced that Jesus died and stayed dead. She really did not comprehend who he was beyond what she had made him to be and wanted to cling to what he was in her life. He was someone who cast out all the demons in her life. She was someone who experienced evil in her life, and she could not rid herself of the evils that seemed to permeate every part of her being. But when Jesus came to her, all those evil things and all that stuff in her disappeared and was gone, and she knew that he did it. And if he did it, he must be one that was from God. And so she clung to him as one who gave her healing. Who wouldn't? And when she went to the tomb with the ladies that we're told about in John chapter 20, verses 1 to 10, she went there and she saw the stone rolled away, but her grief was so powerful it just didn't make sense to her. And more than likely, she saw the empty tomb, but now she's really beginning to fret and worry and fear that something horrible has happened. And she might even have been there when the two angels said, "Why are you looking for the living among the dead? He is not here." But the words just bounced off of her as though they had no meaning at all. There are times in our lives when we either experience grief, illness, sorrow, hurt, pain, despair, loss, that it seems as though nothing will help us. The words of Nehemiah, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." I've met people that they're in such immense pain from the grief of death that one could say to them over and over again, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." Or maybe to be able to quote Philippians and saying, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I say again, rejoice." And the person in grief, those words bounce off because they just can't capture the moment for them. The pain of what they've experienced, this grief and the sorrow of which they are a part of, the words just do not seem to capture them. And I wonder if Mary was like that. Mary could not even hear what was being spoken, but what she saw just didn't make sense. Yes, she saw that empty tomb, and she saw something there, but it didn't make sense in her world, so she had to figure it out. She had to think, what is it? What is it that is going on here? And so she had to run to the disciples and say, "I think they've taken my Lord away from me. I think they've taken his body away." She wants an answer. She wants an answer to her life's question. And her life's question at that very moment is, what happened to Jesus? You know what I think our challenge is many times as parents and grandparents and as people that are carrying the message of Christ into the world is we forget to let people ask the question first. Sometimes we need to let people ask the question so that God can give us the answer. And sometimes when we are asking the question, we really are not looking for the answer that is the correct answer. We're just looking for an answer that will please or at least make us feel like we know what's going on. And even when we get the answer we think we need to hear, we're still not satisfied because it's not the answer that is right or good or godly. Because we really want to hear deep down inside a truth. A truth that will touch our souls, a truth that will penetrate our hearts, a truth that will speak to us, not just as a corporate large group on Easter Sunday morning, but as individuals. So Mary goes to a gardener. Have you ever noticed that when you have a question on your mind and on your heart, you'll ask anybody? You'll ask anybody that comes along. Watch children. If they have a question on their mind, they'll ask anybody. Because it's important to know. We were in a grocery line this past week, and the gentleman behind us asked the question to the lady that was at the cash register, what is Easter? What is the beginning of Easter? What is Easter all about? Wow. It was a great chance to read and find out what she was going to say. She didn't say what it was. And then she was embarrassed. She says, I hope I did not offend anybody. I said, no offense taken. It's just that I would have a different truth than you have. It's a matter of which truth people are really going to listen to. The truth that some want to say about Easter and the truth of Easter itself, the resurrection of Jesus. Mary was looking for an answer to her question for life right then and there. Where is Jesus? You know the story. Jesus was the gardener. And he says, Mary. The gospel truth of the resurrection of Jesus Christ has power in our lives when we hear that message speak to me, to you individually. The power of the gospel of the resurrection is when we hear Jesus call our names individually in such a way that we know that he rose from the grave for me and for you, for us individually. Yes, he did it for the whole world. Yes, he died on a cross for every human being, for eternity. Yes, he forgives all people's sins. And yes, our sins are forgiven. In particular, though, Jesus speaks your name today. Jesus speaks your name today. And he says, this is a day not for weeping, but a day for rejoicing. For I am alive. The one who is living is not among the dead. He is alive and he is with us. And he's declaring to each and every one of us that we are his forgiven children. So we can dispense with all the black garb. I noticed none of you had the black garb on this morning. We can put our flowers in the cross, or we can take them to a friend this afternoon. We can let others know that yes, Jesus died, that Jesus is alive, and he's alive for me. He's alive for you. He is risen. He is risen indeed. He is risen. He is risen indeed. He is risen. He is risen indeed. I invite you to stand and we continue with our service.
As Pastor Tony has said, those of you